All right, good evening and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Wednesday night slash evening. Tomorrow being the 9th of October, which is Uganda's independence. So happy Independence Day in advance to all the Ugandans. And our Ugandan community, our Ugandan subscribers, and to you all that care about a thing or two about Uganda. It's great to be back. It's been a beautiful day. Of course, some days are better than others. That I'll acknowledge. Hi, LFC. How are you? Um, Tomorrow is Uganda's independence. We having been colonized by the British, so I don't know if you care to know, but I just thought I should put that to you. I know African history is something that's based on the limited interviews that I've watched over people from overseas being asked about Africa. Sometimes you find the information a bit lacking about the understanding of the Africa, its history in that regard. But yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Allow me have audios tested. Make sure everything does check out before we proceed any further. But tonight we will be speaking about Manchester United because they are making the headlines for the right or the wrong reasons, depending on where you stand or on how you view things. Sir Jim Ratcliffe has been speaking to the media in an interview with the Times Business podcast. And yeah, he made some comments that I think are worth being digested. And those are what we will, you know, dwell our focus on this beautiful night, among other things that may come in the course of this debate. Like I keep saying, I always want it to be an engaged debate, and credit to you, LFC, and credit to people like Pedri and all the others in their absentia in recent times who do everything to make our debates, our conversations worthwhile, worthy of, us sitting here and we discuss and debate football, among other things. We get to analyze the game, give our opinions, and things like that. For those of you that have watched our content under the video section, I've given the new videos that we put out in recent times. Today, there was one that came out. Unfortunately, it coincided with the sort of news. Okay, it came earlier, and then Ruben Amorim, Sir Jim Ratcliffe then did his interview. So that video is about Oliver Glasner wanting the Manchester United job and why he could be perfect. You say you're waiting for the Premier League. You say stupid international break. Like I said, even during yesterday's broadcast, that we sort of have a love and hate kind of relationship with the international break. And the reason as to why I prefer to call it a love and hate relationship is that when the international break is about major tournaments, we seem a bit okay about it depending on where we are standing. For example, particularly me coming from the Black Man's continent, when it's time for the Africa Cup of Nations, even though it tends to disrupt some teams in some of our favorite leagues in Europe, we appreciate the tournament in its entirety, regardless of when it comes. So, for example, this year's edition, AFCON 2025, will be played in December. And so that should be a reminder to you, particularly LFC, and all the Liverpool fans out there, that you will be missing the services of Mohamed Salah during that period, because Egypt will be part of that edition that will be hosted by Morocco, going, between December and January at December 2025 running into January 2026. So yeah, it's that sort of relationship that we have with some of these major tournaments. Then also, still about the international break, usually, because sometimes the international break means international friendlies, oftentimes it means either of the following things: the UEFA Nations League, or the Euro qualifiers, or the World Cup qualifiers, I can only stay for another 5 minutes. I'll appreciate that. Thank you so much. So whether due to time, okay, whether it's when oftentimes when it's qualifiers, usually we are less engaged or we are less involved, and particularly because it disrupts what our normality is, and that normality is that, for example, leagues resume, we play only 3 weeks or 3 match days are played, and then suddenly players are going away for international break. 2 weeks chopped off. They come back, play 4 games or 5 games, 6 games, depending on what competitions they are involved in. Then they go for another international break. I mean, literally every month for the first 3 months into the season, So you have the September international break, the October, the November international break. And that's then when we take a break after the November international break until March the subsequent year. But I've read reports or suggestions that FIFA is looking to harmonize at least the October and November international break to make it into one international break, so that when seasons start, we only have 2 international breaks and have league football go on. I'm always of the view that some of these qualifiers can be played at the end of the seasons. Would there be any Uganda ex or still playing players? I would know. I'm not sure. I do not know what Ugandan players you do know, current, past, or present, but I'll tell you that Obadia Semakula, I do not know if the name rings a bell, but he passed on a couple of weeks back. He used to be predominantly known as Musamvu Gwanga. So he played some really, really good football. I never got to watch him. I could only read about him in the papers. Philip Obwini, again, these are players I did not get to watch. Philip Omondi, Jackson Mayanja, those kinds of players. The ones, the generation I got to watch was that of Ibrahim Sekaja, David Obua, of course, Massa, Kabagambe, Dan Wagaluka, Sulamatovu, that kind of cohort, that's the one I got to watch. Jajawal, Walusimbi, Joseph Benson Ochaya, and that kind of cohort, and going forward. Of course, subsequently, when I got into, football journalism, I got to sort of to be closer. You say Mike Azira, yes, you say Mike Azira. I think Mike Azira played abroad with the likes of Joseph Karungi, very, very good players, So yeah, I think that suffices in that regard or in that context. So maybe there's a couple of names that I'm pretty sure he played for a US team. Yes, Joseph Karungi and Mike Azira played in some US teams. Particularly, I seem to remember Mike Azira coming to feature for the Uganda Cranes, I think during the AFCON of 2019 that was hosted in Egypt. And yeah, he looked really, really good with the likes of Lumala in that tournament, of course. So yeah, I think there's a couple of names that could ring a bell for you. Anyways, away from the, you say Chicago Sparks or Fire. I think Chicago Fire. I think, yeah. I do not have the particulars on my fingertips as well in regards to the particular clubs he did represent, or the two of them did represent. But yeah, because Ibrahim Sekaja played for Red Bull Salzburg in Austria, so he's a very known figure and is now a head coach at one of those New York Red Bull clubs. So he's made quite a name for himself. Anyways, away from the Ugandan context and whatever is transpiring within our own backyard or within our own history, never mind that I think tomorrow the Cranes will be in action against Botswana. That's in the FIFA World Cup qualifiers. With, of course, they are second in their group. Algeria is leading the pile. Algeria will be up against Somalia. So that in itself puts a different spin to the context. Because if Algeria win their game, that means that Uganda will have to fight hard to finish second, possibly in the group, and then go for the playoffs. So in that sort of context, So I mean, it's not you say Togo. Oh, time to go, my friend. It's understandable. It's really understandable. Just have yourself a blessed night. Some games have been played already to that effect. In terms of the World Cup qualifiers, games were played today, and we will kick off games that were played today. Cape Verde shared the spoils with Libya in a 3-all draw. Cameroon beat up against Goodbye Robert. It's been a pleasure doing this with you, LFC. Always a pleasure to see you around. Even when I'm late, even when I'm very early, you at least chip in for a minute or two. I do appreciate you greatly, my friend, on that regard. Then, okay, so Ethiopia beat up against Guinea-Bissau by 1-0. Eswatini and Angola shared the spoils in a 2-all draw. Mali beat up against Chad by 2-0, while Comoros lost to Madagascar by 2-1. Comoros were down to 10 men. Burkina Faso beat up against Sierra Leone by 1-0. Ghana put 5 past Central African Republic, while Egypt beat up against Djibouti by 3-0. And then Zambia managed to beat up against Tanzania. Niger beat up against Congo by 3-1. Like I said, action continues tomorrow. That's Thursday. Kenya will be up against Burundi, and Liberia up against Namibia. Mozambique will take on Guinea. Somalia will be up against Algeria. Malawi will be up against Equatorial Guinea. Botswana will be up against Uganda. While on Friday, Gabon will be away to Gambia. DRC Congo will be away to Togo. Seychelles will be at home against Ivory Coast. Sudan will be up against Mauritania, while South Sudan will be at home against Senegal. Tunisia will make the trip to Sao Tome and Principe, while Rwanda will be at the Amahoro Stadium to take on Benin. Zimbabwe will be at home against South Africa, while Lesotho will entertain Nigeria in their own backyard. So those are the games that will be coming your way between tomorrow and on Thursday. So yeah, in that sort of regard, like I said, let now the flight take us to the UK, where Ruben Amorim will not be sacked. At least that's the message being put out by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the minority shareholder in Manchester United, who is in charge of footballing decisions or footballing affairs under his Ineos-led group, having acquired, I think, about 28 point something percent of the Manchester United business or empire. Now, just yesterday or today, we did put out a video, like I said in my earlier submission, about reports that Oliver Glasner is interested in the Manchester United job, and we know that he's not renewed his contract with Crystal Palace, having joined them back in February 2024. He's taken charge of them for the second full season, having coming at the time in February 2024 to help steer the club to safety following the resignation or the stepping down of then Roy Hodgson, who had managed the club in the aftermath of the sacking of Patrick Vieira. So we spoke at great length about that. We gave the pros, why he would be backed for the kind of role. We gave we talked about what suits him or what makes him suitable for the role if Manchester United were to wake up and show Ruben Amorim the exit. So for those of you that are interested in that debate, please go to the channel under the video section and check it out and let me know what your views are. But also, particularly yesterday, we did put out another video discussing whether Arsenal are capable of staying top of the Premier League side. Now, in an interview with the Times Business podcast, Sir Jim Ratcliffe was speaking about Ruben Amorim and Manchester United, and he said Ruben Amorim is a good guy. He described him as a good guy. And of course, among the many questions he was being asked about was where he feels the club are, um, you know, quashing all rumors that United are in distress and that Ruben Amorim would be start for him. He say Ruben Amorim is not in immediate danger. Now, United, remember, splashed at least £200 million over the course of the summer to bring in players like Brian Mbomo, Matthias Cunha, Benjamin Sesko, Diego Leone, Seni Lomans, those kinds of players. And while they spent that much, the club have not had the brightest start to the campaign. Despite having 3 victories, a draw in there, and 3 losses in their first opening 7 games, you would say on paper it's not the best of starts because they sit 10th on the Premier League log, even though, albeit, that is only 6 points adrift of the table leaders, Arsenal, which means Arsenal need to stumble on in 2 games, and then suddenly Manchester United catch up with them, and if they can keep a pace. So there's been a lot of speculation, of course, stemming from the not so good results, to say that that Man United are being too nice or too patient with Ruben Amorim. Well, the 40-year-old Portuguese gaffer is not about to leave Old Trafford. Come rain, come sunshine, according to Sir Jim Ratcliffe, he says it's all good. He did say that he is not had the best of seasons. Ruben needs to demonstrate he is a great coach over 3 years. That's where I would be. Now, the key word in this particular case is 3 years. That he needs 3 years to demonstrate that he is a great coach. Of course, the discussion in itself was expansive because, like I said, from the external observers or from we people that get to analyze the game, or commentators or podcasters, whichever the case is, when we are dissecting Manchester United, part of our commentary or criticism has been on his failure to sometimes tweak when we feel it should be necessary to tweak his system. Whereas for me personally, I say the problems are not predominantly that of the system, but also how players are deployed within that system. Sir Jim Ratcliffe sort of shares similar sentiments to say the system is not the problem in a way. Of course, he does continue to add that he's not interested in such talk. He says the press sometimes I do not understand. By the press, he means the media, not the press in the game of football. He says the press sometimes I do not understand. They want overnight success. They think it's a light switch. You flick a switch and it's all going to be roses tomorrow. You can't run a club like Manchester United on knee-jerk reactions to some journalists who goes off on one every week. So you can see that I think he is not too appreciative of the media. And again, I'll say 2 things about this. He's right, first of all, because sometimes we, the media, or broadcasters, or commentators, or spectators, or fans, we're often too quick to pass judgments in total disregard of context. In some cases, we've been considerate of the context. In any case, I'm one of those people who have been considerate of the context of Manchester United. A couple of weeks back, again, I did put out a video on the channel. For those of you that do follow us, adherently, and this was about 3 weeks ago, by the way. And it was saying, the headline was, why Manchester United shouldn't sack Ruben Amorim just yet. That was the headline. Why Manchester United shouldn't sack Ruben Amorim just yet. Now, in that video, among other things, I made arguments to the realm of, one, Manchester United cannot, hire and fire every time they feel like it, because that model has not proven to work. Because you do not tell me that you've gone through an iteration of about 5 managers or so, in David Moyes, in Luis Van Gaal, in Jose Mourinho, in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and Erik Ten Hag, Ruben Amorim being the sixth, and we're talking about permanent managers. In between there, you've had Ryan Giggs, you've had Ralph Rangnick, and you've also had Van Nistelrooy as three interim managers. So you cannot tell me that somehow, in a certain world, all those were wrong choices of managers, that all those are bad managers. In other words, if you really, really digest it down, if the verdict is, because every time you sack a manager, that's a sign of no confidence. That's to say the manager is incompetent in the duties he was assigned to execute. So I've always said that at some point, Manchester United will need to swallow the bitter pill and realize that they need to go back to the drawing board and build this team brick by brick. That it will be painful, it will take time. Now, unfortunately, given the size of Manchester United in comparison to other big clubs and how things go within those clubs at a similar realm of Manchester United, sometimes it does not help Manchester United's situation. First of all, Man United as a club, being the global brand it is built on success. Now, that success came one too often during the Sir Alex Ferguson era. It came one too often than not. And for close on to 3 decades, because he was there for about 26 years, that tells you, because that's a quarter century plus, that tells you that Sir Alex Ferguson was part and parcel of Manchester United. And that following his departure, it was always going to be big shoes for the next person to fill. And for me, I go back to David Moyes. When they sacked David Moyes, I wasn't doing this kind of work at the time. I was just writing at the time. Was I even? I hadn't even started actually in the writing. But I did say to my friends that sacking David Moyes was not the right decision, in my opinion. Why? Because we judged him on the same scale of recent success that Sir Alex Ferguson had achieved. Because David Moyes inherited a team that Sir Alex Ferguson had used to win a Premier League title in 2013. And then when he comes in, you have a Manchester United that still has some senior players in that dressing room who do not believe at any one stage that David Moyes is the right manager for them. So right from the onset, he was bound to fail because that dressing room did not appreciate him as of being the right manager for Manchester United. So eventually, they did not buy into his tactics, in his way of playing, because it was his way of playing that got him there. It was Sir Alex Ferguson that recommended David Moyes for Manchester United, having spent about a decade at Everton. So, of course, he never lived to see the light. He never lived to see his first anniversary, and he got sacked. And then Ryan Giggs managed the club for the remainder of the season, and then they brought in Louis Van Gaal. That was 2014. Louis Van Gaal started on a journey of rebuilding Manchester United, brought in many players, some predominantly from Netherlands, not actually predominantly, by the way, in the grand scheme of things, because he brought in players like Marcos Rojo, Daley Blind, he brought Marcus Rashford was promoted from the academy. He brought players like Anthony Martial, Mauro Fellaini had been a David Moyes buy. I think that was around the same time when the likes of Angel Di Maria come to the club, Radamel Falcao, Garcia Zarate, and all those kinds of players. Of course, you had the likes of Chris Smalley in that team, still young defender. You had the likes of Phil Jones, David De Gea was still fresh in that team, still relatively new. When Rooney was still at the club as a senior player, and things like that. Now, Louis van Gaal embarked on a journey of giving Manchester United a new identity in terms of playing style. He wanted them to possess the ball more, which meant building the ball from the back. Of course, David De Gea struggled with that, but there were being so many passes between the likes of Phil Jones, Chris Smalling, and David De Gea that, well, in other words, back passes, and yet Manchester United were accustomed to playing on the front foot. The likes of Ashley Young, Antonio Valencia, being quick in transition or the counter attack and things like that. That's the game they had been used to. So at the end of the 2015-2016 season, when he guided them to the triumph of the FA Cup, when they beat up against Crystal Palace by 2-1 in the final, he was shown the exit. Because in the eyes of Ed Woodward and the Glazers, they figured he wasn't the guy that was going to bring them success. Why? Because Manchester United felt, having had a bad season or not so good season under David Moyes, and subsequent seasons being not so nice with Louis van Gaal, in terms of them not being at the top of the table or close to being at the top of the table, they figured they wanted success, and they went for a manager whose trade or was renowned for winning titles. That was Mario Jose Felix Mourinho, having won the Champions League with FC Porto in 2004. 2004. He came to Chelsea, won 2 Premier League titles, left Chelsea. Of course, he went to a team like Inter Milan, won a treble, won 2 league titles there in 2 years, left there, went to Real Madrid, won the La Liga title in record style. That was around 2012-2013 season, and things like that. So they bring in Jose Mourinho to get them back to the top. And to his credit, for the 2016-2017 season, I think they finished second. And he said that was the best season he would ever had. They had about, I think, 80 points at the time. And most people looked at that and said, I think they disagreed. At the time, he made requests, or he requested to have more signings, to have more investments in the team. And and his bosses at the time thought otherwise or did not agree with him. Sorry. In the 2016-2017 season, Manchester United finished 6th on the Premier League log. So, fast forward, the subsequent season, that was 2017-2018. Yes, that's the season they finished second. 2017-2018. Manchester City have been champions with a record 100 points. They were 19 points behind the champions. And yet Jose Mourinho said that was the best season he would have ever had with Manchester United. Now, a lot of people disagreed. I think among the people, the kinds of players he asked for was a defender. I remember they were interested in Tottenham's Toby Alderweireld. They were interested in a holding midfielder, and was it a forward or something? So subsequently, he did not get the kinds of players that he wanted at the time, and they struggled in the subsequent season. They really did. So, meanwhile, I think at one point, Michael Carrick held them, yes, as an interim, as a caretaker manager, during that period. But because David Moyes gets sacked in 2013, in 2014, and then Ryan Giggs takes over, completes the season. Van Gaal comes in until 2016. Jose Mourinho comes in. So his first season was 2016, 2017. And they finished sixth, which wasn't good. So they made some investments in the club. And then it did not go well. Sorry, they made some investment in the club. Then I think that's around the time when they bring in the likes of Paul Pogba, Romelu Lukaku, those kinds of players. And then they finished second. So he asked for more signings. They disagreed. Into his third season, halfway, or before actually reaching halfway, he gets sacked. And that's when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer comes in as an interim around December 2018. They go on to have a very, very incredible period of time. I think they had an unbeaten run of about 19 games across all competitions under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. There was a sort of feel-good factor or that new manager bump at the time. When they had that, they gave Ole Gunnar Solskjaer a contract. And there's a famous quote from Rio Ferdinand saying, "Get the papers, put them in front of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, let him sign those papers." In other words, he was really, really rooting for him to be Manchester United manager. So he manages them for 2019, 2020, that COVID season. That COVID season, 2019, 2020, when Liverpool win the Premier League title. When Liverpool win the Premier League title. But remember that in the 2018-2019 season, they finished sixth eventually on the Premier League globe. They finished sixth, with, of course, the biggest credit going to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer for helping them finish that high. Now, in the subsequent season, which is again Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's first season or first full season, 2019-2020, which was predominantly, which was in the latter part a COVID-19 season, they finished third. And again, there were many points behind second place Manchester City because Liverpool won the title in that season. So he guides them through, he takes them into the 2020-2021 season. In that very season, which is predominant, which was also a COVID-19 season, in part, they finished second to Manchester City with about 12 points behind. That's under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Manchester City were champions. Then you go into the subsequent season, which is 2021-2022. Now, it was during the course of that season, around, I think, the start of November, when results were not going their way, that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer gets sacked. And then Michael Carrick takes over as an interim. Of course, Michael Carrick was only in charge for about, 2 weeks before Ralph Rangnick came in as an interim, because Michael Carrick was only caretaker manager. So after Ralph Rangnick leaves at the start of the 2022-2023 season, that's when they bring in Erik ten Hag, who was there for 2 seasons, and in his third season, he gets sacked. So, in other words, in that very video, all that has been a build-up to the video that I was telling you about that I made 3 weeks ago, why Manchester United should sack Ruben Amorim. Because you do not tell me that they really chopped through all those managers and still not managed to win, and still and still feel unsatisfied. And then you want to explain to us that managers are the problem. So there was a bigger problem at Manchester United, and like Ralph Rangnick told us, they needed open heart surgery. So This is all to drive back to the comments of Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who says that you cannot run a club like Manchester United on knee-jerk reactions or decisions. You cannot expect overnight success, that it's not like flipping a switch and then success. Now, like I said, that while that is true, because of the size of the club, usually you do not get a lot of patience with these big clubs. And because there's evidence that sometimes sacking a manager can change your fortunes, why do you tell us that it cannot work? For Manchester United, it has not worked. When you go back to Nottingham Forest, it worked. They sacked Steve Cooper and then brought in Nuno Espirito Santo, helped the team survive relegation, and last season they finished 7th. When you go to clubs like Wolverhampton Wanderers, they sack Gary O'Neill, bring in Victor Pereira, he guides them to safety. When you go to teams like Chelsea, Roman Abramovich was known for sacking managers and bringing in new managers that went on to win titles. In recent times, Chelsea have continued to do that. Mauricio Pochettino, Graham Potter, Frank Lampard, Thomas Tuchel have all been sacked at some point. So there's that. And every time Chelsea had changes, had managerial changes, they went on to achieve some success. But the season of Pochettino, Graham Potter, Frank Lampard. But even in 2 of those careers, you have Mauricio Pochettino guiding them to the final of the Carabao Cup in 2024. And then you have Frank Lampard guiding Chelsea the FA Cup final of 2020. While they lost those finals, you can see they were rooting for success. Enzo Maresca comes in, they win the UEFA Conference League, they win the FIFA Club World Cup. So, sacking managers and replacing them sometimes works. So, there's proof of concept. Go to Bayern Munich, where they've sacked Julian Nagelsmann, they've sacked Thomas Tuchel, Vincent Kompany is in charge, and it's working. Go to Barcelona, they sacked Xavi Hernandez, brought in Hansi Flick, it worked. They won a domestic treble. You know? So really, go to Real Madrid after the FIFA World Cup in 2018. Guess what? They sacked Julian Lopetegui, and it worked. You know? So really, there's proof of concept with that model of sacking managers. So, but Sir Jim Ratcliffe, as a businessman, as a billionaire, he knows that building something concrete, something that is going to be strong, it takes time. For those of you that need to be reminded, Omar Barreda at Manchester United did say that they were working towards winning the league title in 2027, in the 2027-2028 season of the Premier League. So that means we still have what? 2 iterations, 2 other seasons to go. 2020, no, we have 1 other season to go. 2026, 2027. So this season is another rebuild season, another build season. They want it to work to a certain extent. They do not expect instant success. In my own prediction, I predicted Manchester United 27, and if they can achieve that, it will have been a good season. Not by Manchester United standards, but by measure of where they finished last season, 15th. So, yes. So, then you go into the 2025, the 2026, 2027 season, and that's when they improve further from finishing 6th to competing for the top 4, whether I finish in 4th place third place or second, or even win it, it will still be a prep season. Winning will be um, the project materializing before its timeline. But the goal is to win the Premier League title in 2027-2028 season. That's the objective. So I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe, in this interview, partly alludes to that by saying that he needs at least 3 years to prove himself. Last season was half season, give him 2 full seasons, and then in the 3rd year, he should be proving himself that he is the great coach that they think he is. So anyways, that's what part of what he had to say, you know. He also acknowledges that sometimes the Glazers are sort of, they get bad press or bad rap, as he called it. And he insists that they are passionate about the club, you know, but when asked if they might order him to sack Ruben Amorim, he said that's not going to happen. Now, again, this is where when the debate is lost in context. He's not saying Ruben Amorim won't get sacked. His vision is that he needs 3 years to prove himself that it works. But quote me well, if Manchester United I finished 15th or even below, or just slightly above, by slightly above I mean 14th, trust me, Ruben Amorim will be shown the exit or could be shown the exit. Now, when he says that he's not going to be sacked, he's responding to a question whether the Glazers will ask him to sack Ruben Amorim. And he says that's not going to happen. In other words, what he's saying is that if Ruben Amorim is going to be sacked, the orders won't have to come from the Glazers. It will be his decision and that of the other management group, but not as an order from the Glazers to sack Ruben Amorim, you know. So he also went on to say Manchester United will be the most profitable club in the world very soon. Last month, United did announce that they had cut their losses from 113 million pounds to 33 million pounds for the year of June 2025. So, and we know that he's cut the club spending. They've had to let go of 400 people in terminated jobs or lost jobs. They've had to take away meals from staff. If you're not playing staff or part of the coaching staff, the meals are gone. This business of you coming with getting a coffee at the club, getting yourself a bagel, a bun, a sandwich, a hot dog, those days are gone. Yep, carry your own food if you work at Manchester United. So he said the costs were just too high. There are some fantastic people at Manchester United, but there was also a level of mediocrity and it had become bloated. I got a lot of flack for the free lunches. He says, I got a lot of flack for the free lunches, but no one's ever given me a free lunch. And you see, that's the mentality or the mindset of a billionaire. And I'm not saying particularly it is the best mindedness. It's the best mindset to have at a human level or human kindness level. But remember, rich people, they're not in the business. They're not in business to be kind. At least not most of them. They're in business to make money. And that means taking ruthless decisions. Making ruthless decisions, that means terminating people. A manager will tell you one of the hardest asks, even when they are professional HR managers or CEO managers, general managers, whatever. One of the hardest decisions to take is to sack an employee. Not because they're being so bad at their job, but you're sacking them to cut numbers or to cut costs, not because you want to replace them. So that's one of the hard ones. Then he goes on to say that there are two halves of, he says that there are two halves of a team, there are two halves of a football team. There is the business side and the sports side. The biggest correlation, like it or not, between results, he says, the biggest correlation, like it or not, between results and any external factor is profitability. The more cash you have got, the better squad you can build. If you look at our results for last year, we have the highest revenues ever. Profitability, the second highest ever. Those numbers will get better. Manchester United will become the most profitable football club in the world, in my view. And from that will stem, I hope, long-term, sustainable, high-level football. In other words, Manchester United fans, brace yourselves. You're going to need to. United will make more money. More money will mean investment in the club. And we're talking about January, we're talking about next summer, we're talking about the transfer windows after that. So if it eventually gets right this season, hopefully it does. If it doesn't, you'll continue in agony. But Sir Jim Ratcliffe is not parting ways with the Portuguese gaffer, at least not at the moment. And also, in part, as part of the extended interview, he's quoted, at least according to Sky Sports, to have referenced or made reference to Mikel Arteta and the Arsenal project. We know Mikel Arteta walked in midway the season. That was December 2019. He finished 8th. And the subsequent season, in his first full season, also predominantly known as the COVID-19 season, they finished 8th again. But you see, one, if I were to make an argument to disagree with that, I would say, on paper, Ruben Amorim inherited a far better squad than Mikel Arteta did. Nonetheless, even if you were to argue that maybe the squads were the same, Arteta finished 8th, they did not finish 15th. I do not know where Manchester United will finish this season. My prediction is that they will finish 7th. But anything below that, anything below 8th, then we will say, yeah, you're making the comparison, but it's not adding up. The other one wasn't as bad, you know? So, but he's right. He's right to say that this is going to take time. It's going to take some time for it to materialize, for things to click in place, you know? So let's not expect overnight success. We will see whether Ruben Amorim can come. But also, the other thing, this could all be to sort of relieve Ruben Amorim some bit of pressure, because it's not so unique or abnormal for companies or for a company representative to come and say something as in the media, while in the back room or in the kitchen cabinet, things are totally different, you know? For example, I could sit here on the screen, people ask me, how are you? And I say, I'm fine. Yet, when I turn off that camera, the story is entirely different. We do not know. We'll take Sir Jim Ratcliffe's word for it, but yeah, based on results, in terms of financial doing, Manchester United are going to improve. First of all, they have the biggest stadium in the Premier League, 70,000 plus seater. They're looking to build a £2 billion, 100,000 stadium seater to sort of replicate the kind of revenues that Real Madrid are getting. Arsenal are looking to expand their own Emirates Stadium. I think next year it will be making its 20th anniversary. That's 2 decades. They are looking to redevelop it. They own the KAC Sport, own the LA Rams, and they have one of the best stadiums in the United States. One of the best architectural designs, the screens, the round screens hanging from the roof of the stadium and things like that. It's a marvel to see. So they want to replicate that, Arsenal, and they want to expand that Emirates Stadium to be an 80,000 seater. So that means they want to take it from 60,000 to about 80,000 or thereabouts. Remember, Arsenal came from Highbury, which was about a 39,000 seater stadium. So they improved by about 21,000 to accommodate more fans. Because you see, these clubs have fans that do not get the chance to come to the stadium every week, even though they would have loved to, even though they can afford to, but they are somewhere on the waiting list. So Arsenal are looking to expand their stadium. So Manchester United are looking for a stadium rebuild or to build a new stadium. So again, that's all future investment in the club. So Manchester United, your glory days will suddenly return. It may not be today or tomorrow, but maybe in 3 years' time, we'll be having a totally different conversation about Manchester United. Anyways, guys, it's been a pleasure doing this with you. Thank you so much, LFC, and every single one of you that managed to join today's podcast. Allow me to wish you a blessed night, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.